This week on Jerusalem Dateline, CBN News talks with new U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, in an exclusive interview about U.S.-Israel relations.
The bond between our two countries is extraordinary.
Plus, for the first time in 25 years, a new Jewish community breaks ground in Israel's biblical heartland. And the story of Ismael, a refugee from the Syrian civil war, finds hope and a new beginning. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell, coming to you this week with the Temple Mount and the Western Wall behind me. The new U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, made one of his first public appearances in Jerusalem. And CBN News got this exclusive interview with the ambassador where we discussed negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians and the relationship between the U.S. and Israel. Ambassador Friedman addressed an annual meeting of the Jewish humanitarian organization B'nai B'rith. After the address, he gave CBN News an exclusive interview and explained why current negotiations are held in private.
It really is just a mistake to characterize it to deprive all the parties of private conversations, candid conversations, which I think are necessary. So I'm just really not going to get into it. Not because I want to be coy. I just think it's not the right way to proceed.
Friedman said President Trump's recent Mideast trip made a difference in the region.
He's made enormous strides, I think. I think the trip to Saudi Arabia, there's a flight from Riyadh to Israel, the trip to the Vatican. It was an extraordinarily successful trip, and I think you'll see more success building upon that.
During his speech, Friedman went off script. Instead of discussing U.S.-Israel relations, Friedman addressed the pressing controversy between American Jewry, the State of Israel, and the status of the Western Wall. But he told CBN News U.S.-Israel relations are deep and wide.
The depth and the breadth of the relationship is well beyond what I think people ordinarily understand. And when you have the privilege to work in the embassy, and you see all the different divisions, how they're committed to trade, they're committed to cultural exchange, they're committed to various economic initiatives. It goes so far beyond the politics that we read about in the paper every day. The bond between our two countries is extraordinary. And I don't know that gets out as much as it should.
As I mentioned in that story, Ambassador Friedman went off script to talk about a pressing controversy between American Jewry and what's happening here in the State of Israel. To talk more about that controversy is the spokesperson from the Jewish agency, Avi Meir. Avi, tell us about the controversy, because I know some of it has to do with what's behind us right now, the Western Wall.
Absolutely, Chris. As you can see, the Western Wall for many years has been divided between a men's section and a women's section, which is wonderful if one comes from an Orthodox background, but if one is either Reform or conservative, as most American Jews are, they're used to praying together, men and women, in a mixed section. And so recently, a section was created sort of south of where the separated section is, to enable that to happen. And the proposal that was unfortunately frozen the other day would have further expanded that and made it more prominent, as well as putting it under the authority of a mixed committee comprised of representatives from those movements, Reform and Conservative.
So that upset a lot of American Jewish groups. The other controversy apparently involves conversion between Reformed, Orthodox, and Conservative. Please explain that as well.
Well, the law that has been advanced through the Ministerial Committee on Legislation would essentially say that any conversion conducted in Israel not under the auspices of the Chief Rabbinate would not be recognized by the state. Now that's deeply troubling for many people who would like to convert in an environment that is still Orthodox, that still abides by Jewish tradition, but is perhaps not as stringent as the strictures of the Chief Rabbinate. And so that too is causing a great deal of controversy and a lot of anxiety amongst Jews around the world.
I know the Jewish Agency has been in the center of this controversy, Natan Sharansky as well, AIPAC, other Jewish groups. Where do you think it goes from here?
Look, we're hopeful that the government will ultimately recant and will restore the plan regarding the Western Wall, which would truly enable it to be a place to which every Jew around the world could connect, and will not advance this very damaging legislation about conversion, which we believe would prevent many people who would otherwise want to become a part of the Jewish people from doing so.
Well, I know a lot of Christians would want to pray Psalm 133, that how blessed it is when brethren dwell together in unity, and hope this controversy can be settled out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, Avi, for your expertise and explanation. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. One other story that we're covering this week is that for the first time in 25 years, the government is building a new Jewish community in the biblical heartland of Israel. Julie Stahl has that story.
When we came to Amona, there was nothing there. It was just an empty hilltop with nothing there. The only things that were there historically were the ruins of our ancestors.
That was in 1996. Since that time, Israelis built homes and families moved in, including Elad Ziv and his wife, who raised 7 children in Amona. Then in February of this year, the Israeli government uprooted all 42 families who lived in the Samaria community. Israel's Supreme Court ruled it had been built on private Palestinian land.
In any rational place in the world where there is a dispute over land, you do not go out and throw out people for nothing. If someone proves that the land is his, you have assets on that land, then you compensate the one who has the land.
Now, 6 of Ziv's children share this room in a girls' dormitory. He and his wife live in another room. This is what they have for a kitchen.
All the Bible is talking about these areas. We are in the struggle of coming back to our own homeland.
And that struggle could soon be over. There's a new settlement in the works with room for 100 families. This is the place where the new community is being built. It's called Amihai, My People or My Nation Lives. The former residents of Amona chose the name as a reminder that Amona also lives. Jewish settlements in this land are one of the most contentious issues in the Israeli-Palestinian talks. President Trump asked Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to hold back on settlements at their White House meeting. But some think Trump will actually be good for settlements in the end.
I think that President Trump understands that Israel must be strong here in the Middle East in order to have more stability in this region.
Avichai Boron is the spokesman for the Israelis from Amona. He thinks Trump realizes that Israel needs Judea and Samaria to be strong.
If you will cut off Judea and Samaria from the state of Israel, it will put Israel as a tiny state, in a tiny strip of 20 miles, and it will weakness Israel. And he must stop it and not let it happen.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Amichai, Samaria.
Up next, a sober warning for the U.S. Deadly terrorist attacks have rocked Europe in the past few years, even in the past few weeks. And some experts are warning that America is opening itself up to the same type of terrorism. Dale Hurd brings us that story from Europe.
A once peaceful continent has turned into a battleground. Islamic terror across Europe. Could this be a preview of what's ahead for America? Former New York Police Commissioner Bill Bratton said recently that European-style terror attacks are coming to the U.S. Islam expert Robert Spencer agrees.
There's no doubt about that whatsoever. The fact is that everywhere that large numbers of Muslims settle, there's conflict.
Because, he says, the violence flows from the Quran.
The Quran says, when you meet the unbelievers, strike the neck. So the Islamic State does these beheading videos, and the world is horrified. But it's right in the Quran, chapter 47, verse 4. The fact that something is in the Quran doesn't mean that all Muslims are going to do it, but it does mean that some are. There is no doubt this kind of thing is going to happen in the United States once Muslims are here in sufficient numbers.
And with it comes political enforcement by the left, targeting those who oppose uncontrolled Muslim immigration, either with a racist label, protest, or even violence.
Americans are used to other nations following them. But when it comes to Muslim refugees and political correctness and speech oppression, Europe's reality could be America's future.
The most important thing for Americans is stop thinking that you're safe and we're in trouble.
In Paris, American writer Nidra Poller says when she emigrated to France 44 years ago, France felt safer than America. Not anymore.
We're not allowed to have ethnic statistics, but people know where that violence is coming from. Here we have a huge Muslim population that includes fine people who came here to live in freedom and thugs and Islamists, they use the thugs to weaken our democracy. After the thugs terrorize people, then they say you're Islamophobe.
Sweden, a nation with a smaller population than North Carolina, now has several thousand Muslim extremists. Sweden also faces a fiscal crisis because it has accepted so many Muslim migrants. Swedish citizens are literally paying to host terrorists.
It could be that our politicians are so stupid that they don't understand what will happen when you bring in a lot of people from a totally different culture. Could be, but I don't believe that anymore. I mean, it's not just this government. This has been going on for 30, 40 years.
What's more likely is that Swedish leaders don't care. One former prime minister said Swedish culture wasn't worth preserving. There are many Muslims who come to the West to join democracy, integrate with society, and live in peace. But there are also troubling signs, like a poll in Britain last year that showed that 2/3 of British Muslims would not tell police about extremists. This was supposed to be a big peace march by German Muslims last week to show their opposition to terrorism. It flopped. Not only was it small, but if most of these peace demonstrators don't look Muslim, it's because they're not. Spencer says some Muslims come as colonizers to Islamize the West. That's in the Quran too.
Chapter 4, verse 100 of the Quran promises great rewards to those who emigrate in the cause of Allah and die in the new land.
Spencer was poisoned last month on a speaking tour in Iceland, confirmed by a medical exam. He believes it was done by leftists who protested his visit. Left-wing violence against conservatives has also migrated from Europe to the United States, especially with the election of President Trump. The group Antifa, or Anti-Fascist Action, is a European creation. Street battles like the ones involving Trump supporters and leftists happened first in Europe. In 1968, British Parliament member Enoch Powell was sacked after he famously predicted that mass immigration from the non-Western world would someday lead to rivers of blood. Spencer warns that river is flowing to America.
This has happened everywhere Muslims have gone. Why do we think we will be exempt? Why do we think we will be different? The Islam that is taught in American mosques is exactly the same as the Islam that is taught in mosques in Europe and in mosques in the Middle East. It's the same Quran, the same Muhammad, the same Islam. And so the same things will happen here that have happened everywhere else in the world.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Coming up, see what the Six-Day War did for archaeology in Jerusalem.
It's a revolution.
And you were part of that revolution.
I started my career then.
"50 years ago, where I'm standing right now in the Jewish Quarter, was controlled by Jordan. Then, in the 1967 Six-Day War, Israeli paratroopers captured the Temple Mount behind me and the Old City. That was a revolution in archaeology. And since then, Israeli archaeologists have made some of the most significant finds in history in and around Jerusalem. One of the first and largest took place just a few steps from where I'm standing. At 10 years old, Eilat Mazar felt like part of her family came home when she first heard that Israel recaptured the Old City.
Even as a child, I could sense that this is a huge event. It's like you get something back. People related to it like returning a lost son. That's what we were expecting for. Now it's happening.
23-year-old Gabby Barkai felt like his apartment added a room.
It was as if I visited the back room of the apartment in which I lived, that I was prohibited from entering for years. And suddenly it opens. Just imagine, it is my house. It is my city, and suddenly I can see it with my own eyes. I can touch it.
Now both Mazar and Barkai are among Israel's leading archaeologists. With teenage volunteers behind us, we talk with Barkai at the Temple Mount Sifting Project.
It's a revolution.
And you were part of that revolution.
I started my career then.
We sat down with Mazar at Hebrew University, overlooking the city.
After the '67 war, what did it mean for archaeology?
I would say that it's a turning point.
Both described how the Six-Day War redefined archaeology in Jerusalem.
In a couple of years after the Six-Day War, the results of Jerusalem archaeology accumulated to be much more than whatever was done in 150 years beforehand.
From 1948 to 1967, Jerusalem was a city divided by landmines, barricades, and barbed wire. Suddenly, after the Six-Day War and years of neglect, the doors of Jerusalem were opened to archaeologists who longed to uncover its ancient past. The first dig took place here at the southwestern wall of the Temple Mount by Elad Mazar's grandfather, Benjamin.
My grandfather excavated 10 continuous years without stopping. This was a fantastic project, almost no parallel in dimensions. Hundreds of people worked. They revealed fantastic remains of ancient Jerusalem from all periods.
It caused a boom of archaeology. There were suddenly budgets for archaeology. There was a public interest in archaeology of Jerusalem. People come and visit the archaeological sites of Jerusalem.
Since 1967, Mazar and Barkai have made some of Israel's greatest finds.
We showed and revealed King David's palace. We showed now more of the King Solomon's constructions, city, just as the Bible describes. He built a city wall around the temple, around his own palace.
We discovered the earliest biblical manuscripts ever discovered, predating the Dead Sea Scrolls by many centuries. These are two tiny scrolls of silver. We have the priestly benediction. The Lord bless you and keep you in both of them.
So did many of these discoveries after the Six-Day War, did they confirm the biblical record of Jerusalem?
In general, the answer is yes. The history which emerged from the results of the excavations fits well the historical data embedded in the Old Testament.
Perhaps Mazar's greatest find brought the Bible to life.
From the biblical times, finding the seal impression from King Hezekiah himself, this is unparalleled, unheard of, to come as close as you can imagine to a biblical figure, not to mention such a king as King Hezekiah. So to find his seal impression, it's almost touching him.
Is there any connection between what you've discovered and the time when Jesus was here in Jerusalem?
Yes, for sure. In the book of Acts and in the Gospel of John, there is a mentioning of the eastern porch of the Temple Mount, which was pre-Herodian. It appears under the name of the Porch of Solomon. And over there lies a capital, which originates from the Porch of Solomon. We have the floors upon which the coins were rolling when Jesus turned upside down the temples of the money changers. We have those very floors, we have those very coins.
The biblical stories and the New Testament story, by the way, it goes together because they just prove quite accurately the development of Jerusalem, and the way Jerusalem is described is quite accurate.
Today, 50 years after the war, Jerusalem is an open city. Visitors can come to see the excavations below the city of David, at the pool of Siloam, where Jesus healed the blind man, or the massive dig near the walls of the old city.
People can come and see for themselves. And this is the best you can ask for. Come and see.
And for these lovers of history, the city has captured their hearts.
I come in the morning and go to sleep with Jerusalem. I mean, excavating Jerusalem, it's 100% on my mind. Besides my family, I mean, you know, we are very family people.
It's a wonderful city. There is no other place on earth which could compete with Jerusalem.
Coming up, see how Christians help this Syrian refugee widow and her children. Well, some families here in Jerusalem are celebrating and rejoicing. Not far away, some families in Syria are literally fleeing for their lives. The Syrian civil war has ravaged families and sent civilians fleeing into giant refugee camps where they're struggling to survive. Here's one story of how Christians have brought hope and help to one Syrian widow and her children.
As Ismael was on his way home from school one day, bombs began falling around him as men with rifles stormed through the streets of Homs, Syria.
My son was saved by shopkeepers shopkeeper who took him in until the fighting moved on. It was a horrible time, and I was in constant fear for my children's lives. I knew we had to get out of Syria.
Ismael's father arranged for a driver to take Ismael, his mother, and his 2 siblings into Lebanon. Before he could join them, he was shot in the back and killed.
We had a good life. Then the civil war happened, and everything was taken from us. Now I have to raise my children alone and try to start over.
Ismael's family now lives in a massive camp in the Bekaa Valley with thousands of other refugees. His mother told me she works long hours in a nearby field, making less than $4 a day. Many days as she worked, she thought about how Ismael was being mistreated at the local public school.
The teachers hit the children. After everything Ismael had been through, the teachers made it so hard for him that he didn't want to go to the school ever again.
Then Heart for Lebanon, which is supported by CBN's Orphans Promise, invited Ismael to our Hope Center, a school dedicated to providing a safe and loving environment for refugee children.
At my old school, the teachers would hit me if I couldn't answer questions right, and all the kids bullied each other. But it's so nice here. I have wonderful friends, and the teachers are really kind.
At this openly Christian school, along with learning math, English, and music, students are also shown Superbook in Arabic.
Jesus teaches us not to lie and to be good to others. I've learned to be like him and to pray to God when I'm in trouble.
All the children at the school come from Muslim families, but their parents are happy to see what they're learning in this Christian environment.
I don't have a problem with my children learning about Jesus and all his teachings, because now there is something different about my children. I can see a change coming from the inside out. They are getting happier every day.
Orphans Promise and Heart for Lebanon also provide large portions of food each month to Ismael's family and the other refugees in their camp.
I'm so happy to know that there are Christians abroad who are reaching out to Muslims who are suffering and in need. I pray for these people and for God's blessing on them. It means a lot for us to know that they think of us and feel for us.
Thank you for the food and for allowing me to go to this school.
The tragedy of the Syrian civil war has destroyed thousands of families, but it's good to see a heartwarming story like the one with Ishmael and his mother. Please continue to pray for the Syrian refugees and the many ministries like Orphans Promise that are giving them help and hope. That's it for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.